Hi everyone, I don't normally post videos on my Facebook page, but I wanted to share my opinion about churches closing because I can't really, I've expressed some of my opinion by some of the posts that I've made, but I can't really express my full opinion in the intensity that I wish through textual means without using all caps, and then I just look like a jerk or a boomer that forgets to turn my caps lock off. Either way, the narrative that is being pushed by people that I've seen a number of people post things along the lines of, well, people aren't being persecuted for their faith when they get arrested. They're being arrested for putting other people at risk. Okay, first off, there are people in the Middle East, the Catholics in Sri Lanka, the Coptic Orthodox Christians in places like Egypt, probably some Eastern Orthodox Christians in the Middle East, who risk getting blown up for their faith in worshiping. They don't choose to stay home from the churches just because, they don't choose to worship from home just because, they might not get blown up or there's a less likely chance of getting blown up. They still go. The young people probably my age, and parents that bring their young children into the church, and the adults, older adults, come into these churches knowing the risk that they could be blown up, obliterated, destroyed, their bodies, that is, just blown off the map for coming in to worship. So that being the case, I don't think that this argument that is being put forth by people that we should close all the churches is actually a coherent argument, and I'm going to explain why when it comes to immunology and the spreading of illnesses. So even among the 10 people that come in to churches that are allowed, at least I'm not sure what other religions are doing, but in my own Orthodox faith, generally speaking, either the churches are being closed or they are open to 10 people, one chanter, one altar server, one priest, and then some 7 lay people. Even among those people, you are still having the risk of infectious disease spreading. And some people have said, well, if they stand far apart, that's not viable in some Orthodox mission parishes that are small, and even in larger parishes like cathedrals, where there's more space to stand further apart, you are still going up and venerating the same icons, even if you don't touch them. You're doing it by bowing, you're touching the same door handles, and then during the Eucharist, when you receive the communion, you're receiving the Eucharist in the mouth via a spoon, you are still getting within the vicinity of other people. And you are wiping your mouth on the cloth that is meant to prevent the Eucharistic elements from falling on the floor should they be dropped. So, and additionally, a lot of these clergy that are serving are still older, despite the fact that, the services are limited. A lot of the people that are still allowed to attend the services in these limited amounts are older people who are attending and also serving are older people who are more likely to be susceptible to the disease. So a lot of the people that are allowed to attend are still at high risk for infection. And you also have to remember that right now, a lot of what's being done is that people are being allowed to rotate spots at these liturgies, rotate from the chanter spot and the priest spot and the lay people spot, altar server, whatever, depending on the parish, depending on how many of those types of people there are that are a member of a particular parish, those people are still being allowed to rotate. And that being the case, you might not have all 50 of them in one place at one time, or 100, or however many people normally attend on a Sunday liturgy, but you're still having probably the same amount of people rotating from Sunday to Sunday. So I don't see how that is going to prevent infection. It might lower the rate a bit, but you're still, and as far as I understand that COVID-19 isn't fully airborne, in the way that some other diseases are, but it via droplets, it can still linger in the air, so you can have, and it lives on surfaces, so unless you're being vigilant about constantly spraying down the air after every service and wiping down all the icons and all the door handles and everything else you might possibly come in contact with, which I guarantee you not all parishes are doing that, then, it defeats the point. And furthermore, why shouldn't people who understand the risk of going to a liturgy in a time like this be allowed to do it? Why? Like, my thing is, I'm not going out anywhere except for essentials and going to liturgy at a place that's still open, and, I'm wearing masks and such, and when I do, and I'm trying to minimize the risk of being around other people, but the thing is, we're all having to take the same risks of going to the grocery store, going to the pharmacy, so on and so forth. We are all taking those same risks in that regard of still going to essential places. Even a lot of older folks who don't have anybody to do it for them, who are having to take care of themselves for one reason or another and having to possibly expose themselves. Why shouldn't the people who are willing to take the risk of getting the disease be allowed to attend the liturgy? And it's not about spreading it among each other, because the problem is, if you're going out to the grocery store, to Walmart, you're going to Bilo or Kroger, and you go to the CVS and Walgreens pharmacies, you have a much higher chance of catching those things in places like that than you do in a church. And the whole issue right here is also the idea of consent, because if you go into a parish knowing what's going on right now, then you accept the risk of being exposed, and it's not about exposing other people. Well, there might be that aspect to it. However, it's whether it is consensually or unconsensually, because if somebody is high risk and they know they could be possibly exposed either by a high-risk person or a low-risk person, why should they not be allowed to take that risk? It's not about me. It affects me, and it affects all of us right now, but they should be allowed to take that risk. They should be allowed to say, I understand some of these people, they might be carrying this disease. I am willing to accept that risk to go in and worship my God, just in the same way that people in the Middle East and such, where they don't have the religious freedom that we who are lucky to live in the first world do, just like they take the risk of getting blown up. And that isn't something that's happening on a regular basis here. This temporarily having to stay away from church because of physical safety concerns and getting illnesses, that is not something that is a regular thing here. This is the first time something like this has happened in at least 10 years when you consider the bird flu or the swine flu pandemic about 10 or 11 years ago. But even that didn't that didn't grow to the level that this particular issue has. But my point is that those people go into the churches, young and old, knowing that they might get blown up, and they are willing to accept the risk of being blown up, and they don't stay home. You can make the same argument that, the priests, by inviting them in to the parish, are, and other clergymen that are holding the services, that they are inviting the people in and that they are potentially exposing them to terrorism. No, those people know, by virtue of going into a church where religious freedom is not widely accepted, that they could get killed. So why shouldn't somebody in a time like this be allowed to take the same risk? If there's like, okay, well, you might expose somebody to it. I get that, but they are willing to take the risk of me or anybody else in there exposing them or being exposed to the illness. They are willing to take that risk, so it's not a non-consensual relationship at that point. They know, they are aware. So, that being the case, they should be allowed to take that risk. They should have the right to do that. And I'm aware of what the bishops are doing. They're attempting to do it to protect people, but I've already explained that unless you shut it down entirely and you don't have anybody attending services, much less 10 people, you're still going to have illnesses, and if it spreads in one parish and you've got these people rotating on the Sunday spots, you're still going to have a lot of people infected. So if we're talking about flattening the curve, and stopping the spread, why don't we be consistent with that and stop everything that isn't absolutely essential to our survival? Just some thoughts. I agree with what the the patriarch of the country of Georgia had said. Closing churches is an unjustified offense against God. I'm sorry, but for me, worshiping remotely, that's just not the same thing. There is a reason why there are physical church buildings for us to go to, light our candles, say our prayers, go into the nave so that we can be the closest to heaven as we can be while we're still on earth. There's a reason why that exists, and we all take risks every Sunday. There could be a mass shooting, there could be a terrorist attack, there could be a building collapse, there could be an earthquake, there could be a tornado, there could be any number of things. We all take a risk of some kind anytime we go out in public. So I think that this thing is just totally ridiculous. I think the logic that they're using to shut all churches down is totally faulty and doesn't actually accomplish the goal nearly to the extent that people claim they want to accomplish this goal. So that's all I have to say. If you disagree, fine, but frankly right now I don't give a crap.